So what do you want me to do? Do you want me to just like fill in like I'm a normal
Yeah.
That would be
You
great.
should put in your
guy?
bi-weekly.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I could do that.
Just talk about what you want. Well, our innards this week is what we would do if we were building our own distro. So
Ooh, yeah, dude. I'm down. I could talk about hours.
that's perfect.
Hours.
But except you only have an hour.
Yeah, I was gonna say you got
Yeah,
1
yeah,
hour.
I know.
Hopefully,
I know. I
So that
screwed
means you go
myself.
first.
well, that actually means that we'll be done with the bi-weekly wanderings about the time for you to go.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Unless-
Did I already click go live? You clicked go live.
Who did? No.
Somebody
I'm not
did.
even.
It wasn't me.
Somebody busted.
My screen just says scheduled. It's not.
Could someone toss me the note to the Google Doc?
Yeah. Hang on. My.
Oh,
share
it is
just
on there.
says
It
scheduled.
is
It's
up
not.
and running.
Could someone toss me the note to the Google Doc?
Yeah. Hang on. I don't know, man.
Oh,
Share
it is
just
on there.
says
Is it
scheduled.
is it live
up
on
and
YouTube?
running. It is live on
Toss me
YouTube
the note to the
right
Google
now.
Doc. I'm gonna
yeah.
tweet that bad boy now.
I don't know, man.
Oh,
Share
it is
just
on there.
says scheduled.
Is it live
up
on
and
YouTube?
running. It is live on
Alright,
YouTube.
I'm gonna
note
put
to
it in the. I'm just gonna send it straight to you.
All right, I need to mute that because we were getting the inception with my desktop audio.
Let me see why. Oh, there. Now it's showing something going on. Okay. Okay, Mike.
All right, let me double check on Firefox. Yep, everything looks good on Firefox.
Did you get that link, George?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I'm about to just
Okay.
live tweet that we're going live and stuff.
All right.
All right, let me see. I have quite a bit of background noise because there's a fan on, but it's 100 and something degrees, so the fan's staying on.
You're fine.
Hey, have you tried? We should talk about this later. Have you tried that noise RN noise Mozilla
I have
filter thing?
not. I think
amazing.
Leo had mentioned it in the past, but
Yeah,
I've never set it up or anything like that.
it might be worth. I have it set up on my laptop, but not here, because it's kind of fidgety to set up, and depending on your setup, it
Well,
might be
I
annoying.
bet by next month, I'm in the other office, as in, my living room, and I'm set up there again in my other comfy chair.
Yeah.
Because this is Texas, and I prefer not to be dead. I mean, I could podcast in my underwear. Some people
Guilty.
might appreciate it.
Okay. Let's
Hold
see
on.
here.
I need to share my screen. Oh, what happened there? 387 show notes. Go live. And wow. That's still mintCast General. Okay. Why won't it let me do anything? Something.
I see it's up, but it's not showing anything.
Yeah.
There it is.
Something's wrong here.
It's working.
It won't let me zoom in on it though.
Oh.
See what I'm saying? View.
Control.
There we go. But I don't want to be full screen.
Put it in reading mode too. It's a good way to bypass Moss's crazy editing. Well, do you want to do the innards first then? Since he's really limited on time.
And hasn't written his
I had to write a thing.
bi-weekly.
No, you don't.
You don't have to.
Oh, nuts!
I would
need
say
access.
if you're good at improv, then
I got
not
you.
really.
I got you.
It's just helpful to have it in the notes.
Yeah, while we start, you'll see me typing in the background. I'll try to catch up. I need access to the doc.
Did you get that link I sent you?
Yeah, but it asked me to request access.
Oh. Okay. Well, let me do this another way then. Let's do it this way. Editor. And it's sending to your Gmail right now.
All right, who's hosting?
There we go.
I thought
Norbert?
it was.
Norbert, you're hosting, right?
I will try. Sorry, I was muted, but I will try.
All right, then let's make some changes.
You'll try to
the
host.
Show notes here.
So what do you want to do? You want to do Wanderings first since he's limited on time, or how you want to handle this?
I mean, George, you said you have 1 hour.
Yeah, 4.
I think we can fit the news and the Wanderings into 1 hour. So maybe we should just go the regular order and keep the news discussions short.
And then just have him go first then?
Yes,
Okay.
in the Wanderings.
We just won't.
Okay, I will quickly.
The only
try
problem
to...
is this Nvidia thing is going to be kind of a deep dive. That's the only reason I thought maybe we might not want to do that.
Should we just start with the Wanderings and in editing switch it back to being the news first?
Yeah, why don't we do that?
It's our show.
Let's
so
try
do
that.
whatever the heck we want.
Should we also
I was
try
gonna
to-
ask you guys, since we're getting all these changes in the background anyway, if you wanted to
You're coming in
change
real
up how
soft,
we do the
Joe.
show. Oh, well, that's because I turned my gain down because, yeah. Is that better?
Yeah, a lot better, but it's kind of ugly.
What do you mean ugly?
Microphone's right in your face, bro.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Hold on.
That looks great.
Ah, dang it. I hate it when it comes loose.
What's that, on a stand next to you or something?
No, it's on
That's
Just
fine right there.
yeah, articulated arm that I've replaced a bunch of parts on.
Yeah. I've had a few screws come loose too.
Yeah,
And I've had to
but
fix
that's
my arm.
old age.
Okay, so introduction and then straight to the Wanderings.
Well, we need to update the intro section.
From the land of women's rights.
I live in Texas.
You know, I also want to try moving the housekeeping section where we list the social media links for mintCast to the announcements at the end. Should we try that?
It's your world. I'm just a squirrel.
Okay, so it will be like something. Welcome to mintCast episode 387. I'm Norbert and blah blah blah, and we just don't say the housekeeping. We introduce ourselves and then we go to the listing of the topics.
You know it.
So it would feel, because I feel like the housekeeping at the very beginning of the episode it's a bit. It's
a little awkward.
Yeah,
Because,
yeah.
you know, people, especially if you're a new listener and you're like, listen, okay, that's kind of cool. Maybe I want to subscribe or
because
something, you
if
know.
someone wants to look at mintCast on social media, they would have to be sold on the listening to the podcast first, and for that they would have to
Yeah,
just let's jump into it.
right on. I'm with you.
Hi, Alan. Popey told me he's live listening.
Oh my.
So now we have to say
Hey,
the most
Popey.
controversial things we would ever say.
Oh my
Popey, why
gosh.
aren't you on the show? Dang it! I mean, seriously.
I'll channel Popey the best I can, incorrectly, and he'll have to come on the show to clear his name.
Right?
That's probably a good path to success.
Security and privacy. I don't have that one. Intel. Has news.
Dang it.
Intel has more microcode.
You ever get that one eyelash that just curls back and touches your eyeball and
Oh,
just
it
drives you
sucks.
nuts?
The what touches your eyeball?
The eyelash.
Oh, okay.
The little hairs on the eyelid.
Alright, so that section's filled out. My bi-weekly's there. Linux Indards is kind of filled out. Oh, Bill. That's a good job, Bill. Vibrations
What's that?
from the ether. Let me check and see if we got any mail. I haven't looked at that in a couple of days. Deal Jumbo, Quora Digest, Google My Business. I'm now the owner of mintCast. Security alert for
congratulations.
mintCast, Google My Business, manager of mintCast, mintCast podcast, blah blah blah. Namecheap, Deal Jumbo, Quora Digest, Deal Jumbo, WordPress, Job Force alerts, Quora Digest. It's always great seeing all the jobs that Scott could have if he were still checking this email.
That's why it'll be kind of nice to make a somewhat clean.
Oh, I have one that was directly to me for the vibrations from the ether.
We're gonna run out of time here in a minute.
Oh, blah.
Yeah, were we supposed to go live at 3 or like at 4?
We are
Going
live at
live
3.
is a whole lot different than starting the show. We're already live right now.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
we're streaming. We just haven't.
Oh, someone just posted some vibrations,
Yeah.
and the page I was looking at just disappeared.
Yeah.
Can someone fill out
I'm channeling.
the?
I'm channeling my inner Moss today.
Okay.
Sorry
Can
about
someone
that.
channel the Intel microcode article into security so we have something in security? Can someone fill it out? I'm filling out the remaining from the news.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thanks.
I think I can be counted on for a little bit of copy paste.
Copy pasta.
Also making things shorter, because I assume you were the one who pasted the Nvidia article, which was like 2 pages. So I had to truncate that a bit. Because these news articles are always worded very well. I mean, worded very thoroughly, so they have a long word count, and they have a lot of redundancy in them,
Well,
which
clearly
I
I'm
just took
not
out.
going to have time to go through it and truncate it right
Yeah,
here.
I mean, I did it because I looked at it.
I mean
and,
for the microcode thing
okay.
here.
I will have a look at it then.
Right on.
Just delete the bottom half of it.
I just put the top half on.
All right. Well, if you guys are doing that for a minute, then I'm gonna go use the restroom. I will be right back.
Hope everything comes out okay. Ha ha ha. Well, I'm glad you're here, George. I'm sorry we're not more organized right out of the gate this week.
Oh, it's okay. I just want to make fun of Popey while he's listening. And then maybe say controversial comments.
I gotta think of something. I haven't tried his script yet, but then again, I don't have any snaps anymore.
Did
So
you
it's
try
not that-
Alan's thing?
Hmm?
Did you
Yeah.
try Alan's thing on Snap?
I've looked
or
at
did
it,
you
but
do
I
by
haven't
hand?
used it
okay.
because I don't have any snaps anymore.
So you used to use it for Nextcloud, but you snapped out of it.
Ha ha! Oh, it don't stop. I want to know. I want to know what the plan for the future of snaps is. You know, what are they planning to do to improve things like launch times? And I mean, is that being left up to Mozilla to fix? Or yeah,
Not
Well,
our problem.
yeah, lovely.
My only real problem with the snaps is that they have to be copied to RAM. So I think the best they could do is that just have them be files on the disk, as like steps up, like Flatpaks are, so you wouldn't have to just mount them and decompress them, but that is one of the main things that makes snaps. So I'm not sure if they would want to do that, because allegedly it's a good security practice to have them like this. I just don't use them as long as I don't have to.
And normally you don't.
Because everything I need, I can just... There's a Flatpak for on FlatHub.
I mean, that's been my experience as of late. That the one thing that Snaps was making my life easier with was the Nextcloud Snap, and that Docker image is
you guys
just as
leave
easy.
me with the long one.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did you try the Docker image?
The Docker image is great. It's fine. The only problem I've had with it is figuring out how to get the cron job to work. Nextcloud's got a cron. It's either you got three choices. You've got a cron job, or you've got some kind of mechanism that executes some code every time the page loads to do a lot of cleanup work and stuff like this. Well, the cron job is the most all-encompassing way of handling it.
What's
the most
issue
effective.
with the cron job?
Getting it to work in a Docker image.
Does it run on startup, or I'm wondering if it would run?
Well, the cron job runs every 5 minutes.
What's the Docker image?
Nextcloud. When Nextcloud is running, it runs like this. It's a PHP script that has to be ran.
Just mount the terminal and add a cron job.
But
someone needs to mute.
Norbert.
Sorry. RAM switches, a mechanical keyboard.
I have blues.
Blues?
Yeah, he said he had brown switches. I have blue switches. Blues are louder.
Oh.
And way more awesome.
I know, that's why I didn't get the blue ones.
What's the name of the cron jobs? Just so I could Google it.
It runs cron.php. That's in the it's in the config directory inside of the /var/www/ whatever you call the directory for.
So is it not an actual like cron setup?
It's by default the containerized cron is in the containerized image, but when you enable it, every time you start up Nextcloud, it complains that it's not running the cron job. So I don't know if it's you can do the exact tac IT and go in and you can enable the cron job just like you would doing anything else inside of a Docker image, and it seems to work. But then you go to the Nextcloud site and it complains that the last time it ran a command was whenever you first set up the machine. So is it running and it's just not reporting that to the rest of the system, or is there something that needs to be written into the Docker Compose to enable that, or what?
That's exactly right. Here it is. I found it.
Well, if nothing else, and you can run a script that's not in the Docker container to make it run something in the Docker container, then you can set up a cron job for that.
A cron job in the host system.
Yes.
That executes something in the container. Okay.
Yes.
All right, so I'm looking.
Yeah,
at
that issue I linked you to 30899 there's a bunch of information here and different options.
Add it to check this out. And then let's kick this pig.
So, okay. Oh, you've got a... So this needs to be added to the host, like...
As I'm scanning the issue, I think you're going to want to read a bunch of stuff before you modify anything.
Because this is a Docker exec command right here, so I would assume.
Yeah, because it's still pretty fresh.
I don't see why that wouldn't work though. I mean, but you're using the okay. Yeah, I'm gonna try it though, see what works, because the Docker image is 300 times easier to get up and running than doing it from scratch.
Let's go.
And that was the only thing that was holding me back, was the cron job. Okay. Where we at, kids?
I think I'm ready.
All right.
Not having Audacity open yet, but I think I'm ready with the news.
Audacity.
Oh, I'm recording with Audacity, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Test. Okay, that still works. Good.
Audio.
Click to start monitoring. It seems to work. So,
I'm ready to start.
and my mute key is also working. GNOME, you can just set a global mute, which I couldn't do in
That's what I
XFCE. I had to use PV control via the terminal.
There's a pulse audio command you can use.
Yeah,
too.
that's what I'm not sure. PV control is just a front end for pulse audio, right?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
yeah, I guess that's an accurate way of saying it.
Okay. Can we do the 3, 2, 1 record?
Yeah. Who wants to do that?
I can do that. I if I may have the privileges of
Not yet. Give me a second.
doing it. Okay, sorry. Then
I-
go
I-
ahead,
I'm
I'm
Joe.
not
not ready. It's all
Audacity
my
up.
fault.
Oh, I thought I don't have the required experience as a member.
Oh,
You
You
Cool.
hereby
Okay.
have the experience.
You
Norbert.
hereby have the
Thank you.
experience day one. All right.
Okay.
I am ready to start my recording.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, record.
Are we recording? I think I am. I definitely am.
Yeah, we got to do about 29, 30 seconds of silence.
Oh, sorry.
Good enough for government work.
All right.
Okay. So
Three,
I will
two,
try
one,
to.
zero.
Yep. Yes, sir. 3, 2, 1, 0.
Zero.
0.
Let's try that again. Not sure, but that was there.
We'll
Was it
try
just a
one more
delay?
time.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, 0.
Zero.
Okay, that
A little
sounded
better.
better.
Yeah. All right,
Okay.
let's minimize this guy.
And now I will try my ideas for the shortened intro. Welcome to mintCast, the podcast. I just hit my desktop, my desk, physical desk. Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 387. This is episode 387.5, recorded on Sunday the 15th. Recorded on Sunday the 15th of May 2022. From over the moon, I'm Norbert.
In the land of women's rights, I'm Joe.
Hey everyone, I'm Bill.
And I'm George.
First up in the news we have Nvidia transitioning, but there's a catch. Debian talks non-free. Ubuntu has new ISOs, and we have some Docker news. In security and privacy, Intel has a new microcode release. Then in our wanderings,
Yeah, we didn't fill out that section.
okay, well, what should I say?
I lost the election.
Just say you're sorry.
Norbert went
Jo-
back to Debian, and Bill does
Okay,
some
so-
migrations.
Okay, so Joe lost an election. Joe lost an election. Joe lost an election. Okay.
I'm
Sorry. This is what I said I shouldn't do. Okay. So
It's fine. You're fine, Norbert. Relax.
then in our
Take a deep
then in
breath.
our then in our wanderings, I already said that. Joe lost an election. I'm look. I am.
Mind? Do you mind?
Sorry.
I'll just take it from the top.
No, sorry. I can do this.
Okay.
Then in our wanderings, Joe lost an election. I look out to the stars. Bill has been hard at work migrating mintCast. And George?
Nothing. Working.
And George has been working. Let me scroll back up. Then in our inert section, we discuss how we would build our own distros if we were to do so. And finally, the feedback and a couple of suggestions. Alright, we have some very interesting news that probably most people have already heard about, but we would like to do our take on
I
it.
get to read it.
Yes, you do.
Read it. All right,
Go
so
ahead.
Nvidia transitioning to official open source Linux GPU kernel driver. This is from Michael Larable at Veronix. The day has finally come. Nvidia is publishing their Linux GPU kernel modules as open source. With the success of AMD's open source driver effort going on for more than a decade, many have been calling for Nvidia to open up their drivers. Their user space software remains closed source, but as of today, they have formally opened up their Linux GPU kernel modules under the MIT/GPL dual license. This isn't limited to just Tegra or so, but spans not only their desktop graphics, but is already production ready for data center GPU usage. The kernel module consists of 1, the NVIDIA kernel driver, 2, the NVIDIA DRM integration, 3, the NVIDIA mode set driver for display/mode setting, and 4, an NVIDIA UVM for unified video memory. The community behind Nuvo, which is the open source reverse engineered official NVIDIA GPU driver, prospects around
Unofficial.
Did I say official? Okay, unofficial NVIDIA GPU driver. Prospects around this new kernel as they may be able to utilize the GSP firmware open kernel modules, but first will likely take time for the GSP firmware interface to be stabilized and other factors. NVIDIA announcement says, and we quote, "This release is a big step in improving the experience of using NVIDIA GPUs in Linux, enabling tighter integration with the OS, as well as empowering developers to debug, integrate, and contribute back. It also looks like enterprise data center use played a role in the strategy, with also taking up confidential computing and how the data center GPU support is already considered production quality, ahead of workstation and consumer GeForce GPU support." It should be made clear, and I don't feel like it was right here, that this is in basically alpha stage at this point.
The workstation one, because
Yeah.
the data center
what
modules
people
are in a
are-
better shape.
Right. And from what I understand, it's mostly going to be supported by chipsets made in 2018 and
Yes,
newer.
and
Yeah.
onwards. Yes, that's when I said there's a catch. I think there's more like 3 catches in here, and that's one of them because I have a 1060 which is older than it, so it's not supported by what they announced. Maybe they will have support for previous cards, but I'm not sure. So the 1600 series and the 2000 series of GPUs and onwards, those are supported. The other catch is that most of the important code that Nvidia, so what makes Nvidia GPUs basically go, has been moved to the firmware. So, and that's not open source. So this is a first step, and I feel like it is going to be a very slow process. But now there's the chances of someday having a fully open source Nvidia GPU driver has dramatically increased.
Well,
The third catch is that while it's open source, there will not be a per commit history on GitHub. So they will just have one big data dump per release. So they are going to use GitHub to host the code, but they're not going to use it as a to have a commit history.
So are you saying they're not adding the past commit history, or they're obviously keeping the new commit history, right? You're not getting the old.
None of they're not adding the history, but there will not be a commit history onwards either.
So what's better, that or people like GNOME that pretend as though they accept contributions when they just don't?
What do you mean GNOME doesn't accept contributions?
Well, for people that are outside of the blessed realm of people that understand their how they want things, their design philosophy and things.
Yeah, but if the Nvidia code is hosted on GitHub, you'll get the commit history from now on, right? They're not.
No, because it will just be one big commit every time they have a new release.
Oh, so they're not accepting outside contributions.
They will, but not. I guess not through GitHub pull requests. They will be doing it with via some other means. Is what I understand.
Huh.
They said they are looking for a way to contribute to credit contributors. Obviously, the most safer way would be to just GitHub commit history, but they're not doing that apparently.
Huh. Interesting. I didn't know.
I'm not a developer. I haven't really used GitHub for things other than just hosting my .files, but I mean, this seems like a very Nvidia thing to do.
Well, I don't think you're going to get the history, right? Like even projects that get open source, you usually almost never get the history, or you get a sanitized version of it, because usually for legal reasons, there's like a point where you have to like clean stuff up. So I think we're expecting not to get 3 years worth of like, commit log or whatever. But I'm very interested in what the contribution framework is going to be.
Yeah.
Like, do you sign something and then send it to Nvidia and then they integrate it?
That's a good question.
I think we'll have more info on that as things
time goes
proceed,
on.
because I think it's too early, because they are still setting this up. They have a repo, but they are, based on what they announced, they will probably not accept contributions through GitHub, but some other
here we
means.
go. Found it. It's contributing.md right in the root. For the next while, we're going to focus on review on pull requests of functional changes. So it sounds like they are doing that. Please refrain from further cosmetic pull requests until we publish our style guide. And then there's about 50 open pull requests, and 38 have been closed.
So what would be the reason
A lot of
to
them are
release
typos.
this with a dual license like that? Is it because there's elements that they can't really GPL, or?
Yeah, that's my theory, is that in the code that they haven't open sourced yet, the firmware, there might be some code that they don't fully own, and it would be really difficult for them to open source. And right now, maybe they don't feel like, maybe they're working on it, or maybe they still think it's not worth their time, because as much as it pains me to say, Nvidia Linux desktop users are a tiny market compared to the server market. So becomes a big success long term. Maybe Nvidia will want a similar device to have their hardware in it. So in order for that to happen, they have to improve the drivers. So that's my theory, that they are just waiting and they're to see how, if supporting Linux desktop GPU usage will be more profitable for them.
Yeah, I guess time will tell on this. I
So-
think it kind of brings them on par, though. I mean, leaving all the
Yeah.
details aside, it brings them on par with AMD. Because correct me if I'm wrong, AMD even relies on some proprietary bits in the
Yeah,
Linux
you're gonna
firmware
get
package.
proprietary firmware. I mean, that ship sailed a long time ago. You're
Yeah.
gonna get a shim that talks to the kernel and keeps your Linux distro happy, and then it loads some proprietary blob.
Yeah, so
And
there's
then that's it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think we should just be happy with that, or at least satisfied.
I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, I wish the whole thing was open." And that's not how the world works anymore, unfortunately. But think of all the problems you've ever had setting
Yeah.
up someone with like an Nvidia just laptops alone will finally and there's a lot of work. Christian Schaller from Red Hat kind of outlined in his blog the stuff that needs to happen. And there's a lot of stuff. There's like a lot of work that needs to happen, right? Because it touches every part of the stack and all that kind of good stuff. But
it's gotten a lot easier to set up NVIDIA in the last couple of years compared to what it was like 5 years ago. I mean,
But you can still run into trouble if you update
Yeah.
a kernel or you
yeah,
But-
an Xorg
hybrid
version.
graphics is a whole lot easier to set up now than it was
Yeah.
5 years ago.
I will say about the proprietary NVIDIA drivers is that I'm using them and I don't really have any problem with them. If Nuvo ends up being as good as this one is for my 1060, which is not, for now it looks like it won't be supported by the open source modules. If Nuvo benefits from it and gets better support for the 10 series cards, I think I might start using Nuvo. But yeah,
So we'll still have to install Nuvo. It won't go into the Mesa
I'm not sure.
thing.
well, eventually it'll just be like how it is with AMD now, right? There'll be the kernel piece, which is AMD GPU, and this is what they're kind of announcing, even though this isn't the thing that they're going to merge into the kernel. And then they'll have to have someone's going to have to write the equivalent of RAD-V for NVIDIA, right? And then adding the Mesa support. But it also does mean that for all three GPU vendors, you'll just install your distro and you'll install Steam and then whatever. You don't have to go get drivers.
That'll be so. That'll be kind of weird.
Yeah. So I don't. Like the attitude I'm kind of taking is like, maybe it's not. Maybe your 1060 won't ever get there, but whatever your next GPU is, or the one after that, is probably. Like if I had to buy a GPU today, a discrete GPU, it'd still be an AMD one, right? But I could, in 2 generations. By then Intel will be more mature and you'll have Nvidia. So who knows? I think that's a pretty
It's
good,
fantastic.
Good trade-off there.
I read some interesting numbers on Phoronix. They say that with the 5.19 merge window coming up, they loaded the numbers and the AMD graphics driver has surpassed 4 million lines of code in Linux 5.19, while Nvidia opened up at 1 million lines of code. So it's just numbers. Also, Nitrux Linux, the new release of Nitrux, they now added an Nvidia Iso. So for now, that seems to be the best middle ground, to just provide an ISO with the Nvidia drivers pre-installed, so users don't have to deal with that. Maybe even Ubuntu could do that. I'm not sure about the legal aspects of that.
I think they'll just mainline it in the distro. I mean, from what I read of the announcement, it looks like Canonical, Red Hat, and
I mean the current closed source drivers, because we won't really be getting a proper open source NVIDIA driver in the kernel for at least for many months.
Yeah,
so
I
at
think
least
the beta driver will go how they normally go, however you get normal updates in your distro, right?
Probably, yeah. And then if you're on the LTS, it'll just be backported.
Yeah.
So, all right, moving on to the next thing.
This is related to the previous piece of news in a way, Debian considers including non-free drivers in their official ISOs. And this is from Phoronix, but it's quoting an article from Steve McIntyre's blog, who's a Debian developer. So one of the big problems with Debian is that their official ISO doesn't include the non-free firmware that is needed, for example, to get Wi-Fi working on many laptops. And when first time I tried installing Debian on my laptop, I had this issue where it said, we don't have the firmware for your network cards. Please download them from the Debian website and put them on a USB drive, and we can load it from there. The alternative is to just to download the unofficial ISO from Debian, which includes it already, but that ISO is very, very well hidden in their website. So and nowadays if you're installing Debian on a laptop and you want to have Wi-Fi, you're very likely going to have this issue. And probably with other hardware, but it's the Wi-Fi drivers the Wi-Fi firmware that is usually mentioned when this comes up. And Steve McIntyre listed a couple of options that they might take. One of them is to just keep the existing setup, which is you go to debian.org and there's a download button which downloads the net installer without the official ISO that doesn't have the non-free firmware. It's not a very good it's not very good, because people who don't know where to go for the unofficial community maintained ISO will have a hard time setting up Wi-Fi. We could also just stop providing the non-free unofficial images, but that would make it more difficult, because then the only way would be to download the archive of firmware, put them on another USB drive, so you would have to have 2 USB drives for the installation. We could this is a quote from his blog. We could stop pretending that the non-free images are unofficial and maybe move them alongside the non-free images so they're published together. But he also points out that this might be confusing in a way that people wouldn't understand why the ISO without the firmware is still there in the first place. Or he says the images could technically simply just have the non-free firmware included in the official image and add the firmware packages to the inputs list for those images, which I think might be the most straightforward way, because Fedora also doesn't have no non-free software in their repositories, but it's still, the Fedora ISO still shipped with this firmware, the files. So I think if Fedora can do this while still being they're still holding true to their philosophy on non-free software, Debian could do as well. Or he also lists a fifth option, which is they could split out the non-free firmware packages into a new non-free firmware component in the archive and allow a specific exception only to allow inclusion of those packages on their official media. I'm not sure what this means. I think this is related to how they would build ISOs. And he says they would then generate only one set of official media, including those non-free firmware packages. So I'm not sure how this differs from the previous one, because the way I understood it, in both ways, they would just include the non-free firmware in their ISOs.
The one problem with that non-free ISO is that you are getting everything. It's either you're getting nothing or you're getting everything, including a whole bunch of stuff.
Yes, but to be fair, it's the same with Fedora, because if you do a full Fedora workstation install, it will install the firmware for a bunch of different types of network cards. What I did is I always do a minimal installation of Fedora because I like to tweak things, and that doesn't include the firmware. So I had to connect my laptop to wired internet, and I downloaded the firmware that is needed and specific for my network card. So I don't have all of that on my Fedora install, but I do have it on my Debian because I just went for the non-free Debian ISO because that's the easiest thing to do.
How big is the firmware in the FAT install?
I can look at the size of the firmware. The firmware on the archive that only has the firmware. Let me give me a minute.
It's probably not in the real world a huge difference.
Yeah, I have 260 megs on my Silverblue install. Is the size of user lib firmware. But they're compressed on disk. That's neat. I didn't know that. It's just a bunch of .exe files.
Debian has changed their website since the last time I've looked on here. Interesting. Where's the download button? Ah, there it is.
Okay, so
And-
there's the firmware.zip on the Debian website, which has all the deb files for this firmware, and it's 110 megabytes. So it's not that many.
Yeah, that's
It's-
nothing compared
that's
to the hardware
negotiable,
enablement
yeah.
you get out of it. Yeah.
I wonder how much that is once I unzip it.
But I'm on the page here for thank you for downloading Debian, and there's a link right down here in the middle of the screen saying non-free firmware, and oh no, that just takes you to a. I thought there was a link
Oh.
somewhere. Oh,
Okay,
here
so
it is.
I unzip them and it's still 110 megabytes. So, but these are the Debian installer files, not the installed firmware size.
I think yeah, at
for-
least make an easier path to get to the non-free images.
Arch recently split their Linux firmware package into multiple packages, and I think that freed up around 300 megabytes on people's systems. So I think
What are we gonna do with all that space?
And the remaining firmware package, I think it takes up 100 or 200 megabytes. So it seems to be between 1 and 200 megabytes on each distro.
Well,
So
cool.
it's not that big.
So moving on, Joe.
Okay, Ubuntu 22.10 Kinetic Kudu daily build ISOs are now available for download. This is from 9to5 Linux. Now that Ubuntu 22.10 has a release schedule and a release date set in stone, it's time for Canonical to kick off the development cycle and start pushing daily build ISOs for early adopters and application developers. Dubbed Kinetic Kudu, Ubuntu 22.10 is slated for release later this year on October 20th, 2022. Now, Canonical published the very first daily build ISO images for Ubuntu 22.10, inviting early adopters and application developers interested in test driving the upcoming release to find and report bugs. Now, it's been a while since I've done like a beta like that or anything, but from what I remember back in the day was, yeah, you could get those early releases, daily builds, but they were nothing like the end product.
Can you just install a very early daily ISO and keep updating it, and will you end up with the final system?
Yeah, it will slowly become.
Or are there cases when they have to change something that requires a reinstall?
That does happen sometimes, and they do also recommend sometimes that even if your dailies do make it all the way to the end, that once the final comes out, that you do a complete reinstall.
What I would be more interested in is trying GNOME 43 as soon as it drops. What would be the best way to do that? Because I've heard that because they managed to get. Yeah, no, I mean even sooner. So maybe like a development version, because they managed to get GNOME 42 into Ubuntu 22.04. So I assume 22.10 might have GNOME 43. So does that mean at one point the daily ISOs for Ubuntu 22.10 will just get the alpha or beta release of GNOME 43?
That I
Yeah,
don't know.
but that usually happens later in the cycle. That'll happen
So-
around August-ish usually.
So if I want to try GNOME 43 development versions as soon as possible, should I just go for Fedora Silverblue or something?
I would do GNOME OS. I think they generate daily images. Let me
Yeah,
know.
but there's not really a way to install it alongside another OS, so I would just have to do it in boxes.
Yeah.
Yes, but that way I wouldn't. I'm not sure if I could try the. They will have the two-dimensional gestures, so will I be able to do a diagonal gesture and switch workplaces and open the overview at the same time? So don't have to do two separate gestures. So I'm interested because it will feel more natural and it will be better for my tablet.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't You'll definitely get GNOME 42. It'll just be later in the cycle. Like if you were to install it today, you'll probably just get what's in.
Yeah.
What's
So
in the
basically,
LTS.
if I were to install daily for 2210, I would just get the packages from 2204, and they will be just gradually upgraded to the new ones.
Yeah, and then over time, at some point, the desktop team will be like, okay, we need to start putting in the newer versions, and then you'll just get them as daily updates, and then eventually that will become the final one.
Okay.
Fedora's the same way, but that happens in Rawhide, I think.
So when I said Silverblue, I meant should I install Rawhide?
Yeah, the thing is, Rawhide's a little aggressive, man.
Yeah, like, it's not meant to be. It's not meant to be used, but
for sure, that's a VM. I recommend that one be a VM.
I'm not sure if I can try the new gestures in a VM though.
Fair enough.
Who wants to take the next one about Docker?
Oh, Docker Desktop is now here for Linux users, and this is from its FOSS. Docker Desktop is the easiest way to containerize applications. You do not need to think about setting up an environment on the platform or of your choice to get started. The Docker Desktop application comes with container tools like Kubernetes, Docker Compose, Build Kit, and vulnerability scanning. Previously, it was available for Windows and Mac OS only. So Linux users were restricted to the Docker engine to test their Docker containers. To mention some highlights, as a developer on Docker or on Linux desktop, you can now access new features using Docker extensions, seamlessly integrate with Kubernetes, and easily manage and organize volume containers and images. Yeah. So is that cool or not?
I'm not sure. I wanted to.
Yeah.
Bill, you said that you stopped using the Snap version, the Snap of Nextcloud. Are you just using the native package, or are you using Docker for that?
Well, I've got a Docker image on this server, and it's running native on this one. And the native one is the one that we're going to be using for the show now. And that was just because I wasn't, like I was talking to George about a little while ago, I wasn't real comfortable with the way the cron job works in the Docker image. But to be fair, that Docker image, once you get it up and running correctly, it's fantastic.
You're done forever. Yeah, it's great.
They've got the Docker Compose right there on their GitHub page. I mean, you just pair it up. Okay, you pull the MySQL image and the Docker image, and those two link up with each other. And
so this Docker Desktop that was released, it doesn't really have anything to do with running Docker headless system. It's just
that's more of a GUI thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
like Portainer or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the important thing here is I think a lot of people, Docker, the command has always been on Linux. Like, why do we need the GUI or whatever? But I think it's important also for organizations to have documentation, right? Or developers who are like, this is how you set up Docker on your work laptop or whatever. And they have their OS 10 instructions. You know, now like the Linux one will be like just similar. So you could just double click and get a Kubernetes cluster. I think is awesome.
That's fantastic.
Right.
I wonder though, for just your average person that's running a few containers, the cat's been out of the bag so long, you know.
Yeah. It's definitely they should have delivered this years ago, but I'm glad they got it together. I mean, you know,
because it wasn't real clear for a real long time whether they were even trying or moving towards releasing that. So people just kind of,
they're like, you're a Linux nerd, just use the CLI.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
They just kind of counted on us to know what we were doing, and we kind of did. But at the same time, for serious deployments with Kubernetes and setting up, you know, real complicated clusters and things like that, it's nice to have.
Yeah, it's just click a button and you have Kubernetes.
Yeah.
I mean, what's not to love?
So yeah, that is kind of cool. I don't know that I'll ever have any use for it personally, but then again, the only reason I don't know that is because it hasn't existed for me. So, you know, once I look at it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's interesting, and then go from there. Docker is worth learning, folks. If you have any kind of server needs whatsoever, or you're wanting to spin up Nextcloud or Jellyfin. Jellyfin's the other big one I use it for, because it's the absolute easiest way to get that up and running, and it just runs flawlessly, and it's worth learning how to make work, because it is a real cool way to get something working. And like Flatpaks, like snaps, it works. Its design is based on the idea that you can containerize all of the runtimes and the dependencies and tool chains that an application needs, and then you don't have to worry about your host system getting out of step with the application itself, because the only thing your host system is sharing with that container is the kernel. And beyond that, it's got everything it needs. So yeah, it's a cool thing to learn how to get working. And it's not all that complicated, because most everything that works well is copy pasta anyway, right from the Docker hub or the GitHub page associated with it. So anyway, moving on to security and privacy.
And I got to roll, guys. So we'll catch you all next time, or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And the next
awesome.
time, and the next time.
All right. Cheers.
Okay.
Yep.
Bye.
We'll see ya, folks. That was George Castro. Many of you might know him from shows like Bad Voltage fame, and oh gosh, he's been on several. But we were real lucky to have him. So anyway, I'm sorry, Norbert. Go ahead.
Intel releases new CPU microcode for latest security advisory, CVE 2022-21-15-21151. This is from Ferrarix. In addition to all the product announcements made for Intel Vision 2022 in Texas, today marks Patch Tuesday. There was also a new round of security disclosures from Intel. This month there are 16 new advisories. Am I reading that word right? Advisories?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. This month there were 16 new advisories for addressing 41 vulnerabilities affecting their software and hardware. 76% of those vulnerabilities were found by Intel engineers. Yielding the new CPU microcode drop today is Intel SA 000617/CV 2022-21151. This medium-rated security advisory is due to a security issue with some Intel CPUs that could lead to information disclosure via local access. The issue is described as processor optimization removal or modification of security-critical code for some Intel processors may allow an authenticated user to potentially enable information disclosure via local access. The new CPU microcode published today takes care of that problem. The Intel for Linux 2022-0510 microcode release, in addition to that security fix, has various functional issues resolved too. This is their first Linux microcode CPU drop for Alder Lake processors, while the updated CPU platforms range from Skylake and Valley View through Rocket Lake and Tiger Lake. The updated Intel CPU microcode for Linux users can be found on GitHub while Windows will likely update. Windows Update. Okay, so that's not relevant. It's interesting because this is also sort of ties into our discussion about non-free firmware and microcode, because if you install Debian via the non-free ISO, it doesn't have the microcode by default. Neither does, for example, Arch. Or if you do a custom minimal installation of Fedora, that doesn't have it either. But if you have a regular full Fedora install, it will have it. But I wonder if the non-free Debian ISO includes it. I will have to look into that. So yes, when I installed Arch for the first time, I asked my friend, so there's this microcode thing, should I install this one? And he said yes, because it just updated security. So in case someone doesn't have microcode on their system, it's encouraged to install it. Does anyone have anything to add to this?
Nope. Moving on
to the bi-weekly wanderings.
Yeah.
And first up is Joe's turn.
Yep. Well, the election is over, and I lost. But I think I did well considering that I was up against a long-term incumbent that had a lot of financial backing. My team was good, and I loved all the outpouring of support that I got, but in the end, I received 37% of the vote. I still think it was good, considering that I am mostly an unknown. But I do have to say that I did enjoy campaigning. I don't know that I would want to do it again, but it was definitely different from my normal. Hopefully, with the campaign being over, I should be able to get back to doing some projects that I enjoy. I have a Mac to finish taking apart, even though I don't think that I'll get it fixed. Just, my unfamiliarity and the luck I've had with tracing problems on boards. I also have that XPS that still won't work from the battery. That's going to be expensive to get to the next stage of testing, though, so it's probably going to sit for a while, because the next stage of testing on that would involve getting a working one and checking and verifying that the batteries that I have that I've tried to replace in there are not the problem, because 3 different batteries, all the same problem, would not charge those batteries and would not power from those batteries even when I could verify that they had like 70% charge. So it's going to end up sitting for a bit. Oh, I'll probably still use it, even though I just have to use it plugged in. And I am planning on doing more videos of the projects that I'm working on and putting them on YouTube, maybe sharing them on Facebook. Even if no one watches, or if they end up all being very similar, I still want the practice, and I want to be putting them up. I figure even if the first few dozen are terrible, eventually I'll get better, and someday it'll be something watchable. My son got a new laptop through a Texas program for kids with disabilities to help with school. He ended up with an extremely nice MSI gaming laptop with an 11th gen i7 processor, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and a 3050. It's beautiful and should last him several years, and it's going to end up staying running Windows for the foreseeable future. I
But
know
it does support the new open source kernel
Yeah.
modules.
Yeah, and I know what'll happen if I try to put Linux on there. It's just going to be a fight with the school systems every time he tries to turn something in. Every time something doesn't work for whatever reason, or they can't figure out an application, it's going to be Linux's fault, and I'm just not going to add that barrier for him. Now, I'm also getting a new laptop from work with a 10th Gen i5 and 16 gig of RAM. I'm getting it because the new area that I'm being moved to in the office does not have the thin clients like the previous area that I was in. I'm also working on getting back a temporary exception so that I don't have to go to the office until we know more about how the numbers will be at the office and in Texas in regards to COVID, since my middle child is immune compromised. I'd obviously prefer to run my own laptop, but they're not doing a bring your own device program at work, so since I won't technically own that laptop, it's also going to have Windows on it, and that's not going to change. And that's really all that I've been up to. I'll let you know more once I get the laptop.
Well, if you decide to run again in the future, you would have the benefit of your name already being out there due to the previous campaign.
Yes, and I think I could probably do well if I were to run like next year against a different opponent, or maybe in 3 years if the person I was running against doesn't want to run again. She is older and maybe would want to retire one day, so I'll figure out when the time comes if I'm going to run again or not. Norbert, what have you been up to?
Well, I had a week of what's it called? Yeah. So although although technically at the university now we have in-person teaching again. A lot of my classes are still online, but I did have a week of intensive in-person practical classes 2 weeks ago, and so I brought my laptop and I was running Fedora, and I had to connect to the Wi-Fi to do the practical work. And the university Wi-Fi, the authentication system is a kind of broken, and I tried to connect, but it wouldn't. The authentication would just fail every time. So what I did is just I didn't really think it would work, but I did still have the Debian partition on my laptop, so I just rebooted to Debian, did the same thing, and it connected on first try. So then I ended up using Debian for that 1 week, and after that week of practicals, I just stayed on Debian. I don't think this really counts as distro hopping, although I've been using Fedora for months and now I'm back on Debian, in part because Dave Miracle from Distropos Digest said that he had very good experience with Debian testing running GNOME 42, and I think the reason why I didn't end up using my Debian installation a lot because it was running XFCE, and while I do prefer XFCE for everything on my desktop, and I can't really get into the GNOME workflow on my desktop. On my laptop is the opposite. I couldn't really get into using XFCE because I just like GNOME with a touchpad so much. So I just installed GNOME 42, which is surprisingly already in Debian testing. I think it's because how they managed to get done the work for GNOME 42 to be in Ubuntu 22.04. So I think Debian testing might have benefited from that, and it ended up getting GNOME 42 sooner than it would have otherwise. So, and it works really well. I think even the Flatpak integration is better than I remember with portals and stuff. So I think the experience is now on par with Fedora. I really don't think about which distro I'm in until I open the terminal and have to do a system upgrade. So yeah. So basically, I'm still on Fedora on all of my devices, but except my laptop where I'm back on Debian. And I also had a different. I also took a class at the university called Life on Exoplanets this semester because I needed some extra credit, and I am a biologist MSc student, but this particular course was held by the Institute of Physics. So it wasn't held by the biologist, but an astrophysicist, I think, or astronomist, and it sort of got me interested in astrophysics and just space in general. So I started looking for audiobooks that I might want to read. So I started looking for audiobooks about astrophysics that I could give a listen, because lately I realized something. I want to minimize my consumption of short form video and audio and listen and watch longer things, because my philosophy is that if you have 10 minutes of free time, instead of watching like 10 1-minute videos, it's more productive to watch one 10-minute video. So it's part of the reason why I never really tried TikTok at all. So there's a couple of channels I follow on YouTube that already do videos on the astrophysics. For example, I really like Veritasium, and I have a new habit of watching Veritasium videos while on the treadmill, which helps me convince myself to get some exercise, because unfortunately I'm one of those people who don't really like doing much exercise. So I sort of have to occupy my mind with something else. So I just put up my phone on an elevated something to be about eye level, and I just listen to it while on the treadmill. And I found an interesting podcast/YouTube series on astrophysics, which is called Ask a Spaceman. And I will have to look up who the host is. Sorry, 1 second. So it's Ask a Spaceman by Paul M. Sutter. And I listened to a couple of episodes. These are very easy to digest episodes, around 30 minutes long. And in each one, he just covers one question that the listeners or watchers had. Stuff like when did the first stars form, or what happens when you fall into a black hole. And I really like his the way he speaks about things. It's very engaging, so I can really recommend this to even people who have. I mean, I don't really have any experience in astrophysics. Astrophysics is basically the study
So
of how things work in space. Sorry.
what happens when you fall into a black hole? Well, first you die, and then you turn into spaghetti.
No, it's. I guess it's the other way around. No, actually, but I guess now I will tell it because it was also covered in the lectures that I took at the university. So if you fall into a black hole, what people, because the closer to you are to to something that has a strong gravitational field, the more your time slows down. So if someone watches you fall into a black hole, they will see you approach the black hole, but you just starts to slow down. And when you are approaching the event horizon, which is that there nothing can escape from, you appear to be almost frozen in time. So they never quite see you cross the event horizon. But because your time slows down, from your perspective, you see the universe around you speed up. So they see you slow down infinitely, but at the same time you see everything speed up infinitely. So if you are falling into a black hole and you look away from the black hole out to the universe, you see everything speed up, and you basically see the entire future of the universe play out before you. At least that's the theory. And the host of the podcast, Paul M. Sutter, says this is probably, if he could choose how he dies, this would be probably the coolest way to die, because you would be able to see everything, the future of the universe. So yeah, and it's things like this that are he explains things like this that are very easy to understand, and he has a very entertaining show, so I can recommend it to anyone. I have a couple of audiobooks on my list that I want to listen to but never had, such as A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking and Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson. And coincidentally, there's another podcast that I can recommend, which is just called Ologies. And in each episode, it's basically an interview with some sort of ologist. So anything that ends with ology, like biology, cosmetology, anything, entomology. So all sort of branches of sciences. The host Ellie Ward invites scientists and interviews them. And I started listening to it from the beginning again, and I just happened to get to the episode on cosmetology. Or is it cosmology? The cosmetology is fit. So cosmology, which is basically astronomy and astrophysics and stuff. And I wasn't looking for it, but I found an audiobook by the person who she was interviewing. I will have to load it up. So it's The End of Everything, Astrophysically Speaking, by Katie Mack, who she described herself as a cosmologist on the podcast. So all of these audiobooks, I'm looking into audiobooks because I like listening to stuff, because then I can just be productive and doing something else in the meanwhile. And I want to try to listen to more long form content rather than it's still nice to listen to something that's 30 minutes or maybe 20 minutes, like a Veritasum video or the Ask a Spaceman podcast that I mentioned. But I want to try to improve my attention span, because the other day I caught myself. I was just sitting on my bed scrolling my phone, and I realized I only had one sock on. The reason why I sat down on the bed was to put on socks, but I put one of them on, and then for some reason I just picked up my phone and started scrolling, and I forgot why I sat down. That was the point where I realized, okay, it might be true that humans in general have an issue with their attention span getting shorter nowadays. So I want to try and listen to more long-form content and improve my attention span. And do I have anything else in my show notes? I upgraded to Fedora 36 as soon as it came out on my desktop, which runs XFCE, and I was preparing to having to deal with libad beta because thankfully the GNOME app that I use on non-GNOME systems the most is Disks, and it was one of those that hadn't been ported to GTK for it, so it could still use my system theme. But for example, there's the Disk Usage Analyzer, which is now using libad beta, so it didn't follow my system theme. But then I realized that you can still apply GTK themes to libad beta apps. It's not you're not supposed to do this according to the GNOME theme because it's not supported, but in the file /etc/environment, you can add gtk_theme, all caps, equals, and then the name of your GTK theme. And it even overrides if you have a GTK theme set in GNOME tweaks. So it's the most global setting for GTK themes there is. And if you do that, and you have a theme that works properly with libad beta apps, then you will be able to theme, if you want to theme libad beta apps. I tried it on my laptop in GNOME, and the theme I use is Kios. I'm not sure how it's supposed to be pronounced. It's SKUOS, and it broke the layout of the settings apps. So I think it has GTK4 support, but it doesn't have proper libad beta support. So that's something you have to look out for in case you want to theme libad beta apps, because I think so people had the impression that libad beta is the end to theming as we know it, but turns out you can still theme things while so the GNOME team is working on a theming API. So I assume in the long run things will be sorted, and if someone really wants to apply GTK theme, they will be able to do so. So I can now run libad beta apps with my system theme on XFCE. And going back to space a bit, I forgot to mention that the teacher at this course, he was talking about stuff like, is the universe deterministic? Is there true free will? And he recommended a TV series called Devs, DEVS, so it's short for developers, which he said it was probably the best TV show that came out in the past decade. So it's a miniseries, only 8 episodes, and I gave it a watch, and I really enjoyed it. So that's the main.
I was going to ask you about Devs.
Yeah. So I don't even want to say, it's one of those shows where if I were to say anything, it might be spoilers, which in itself says a lot. I guess it's a very interesting series. So the main premise is the universe deterministic? Is there true free will? And it also has something to do with quantum computers. Not the technical part of quantum computers, but there are quantum computers in it. So the premise is that it's set in a world where there have been more advancements in quantum computing. And some people might be able to put together what the synopsis is on base what I said. But if someone likes good sci-fi, I can recommend this. It's 8 episodes, 8 hours, and it was very entertaining. And I've also been drinking cold brew green tea because it's getting warm, and I like cold tea in the summer. And not all green tea. Sorry for the sharp change of topic, but I just have a empty glass in front of me because I was drinking green tea. And I like green tea because you can even make a weak green tea and drink it instead of water. My philosophy is that people eat enough sugar so you should avoid drinking sugar. So whenever I don't feel like drinking water, I will just drink green tea. And if you just put some green tea leaves, loose green tea, gets steeps better in cold water. So the one I got can be, so you put the leaves in cold water and it's ready in 1 hour. Maybe for some green teas you have to wait for 2 to 3 hours, but I like it because I put it in the fridge, I close it up, and it steeps, and an hour later I can just have my tea ready.
Yeah, that's a whole lot better than coffee, which takes like 12 hours to properly steep while cold.
I never tried cold brewing coffee. But I also haven't tried black tea. I've tried green tea and white tea. I also like white tea, and it turns out to be also good. Well, when cold brewed. So, and I could brew the tea regularly and wait for it to cool down, but I've the colder the water is, the less bitter the green tea gets. So if you cold brew green tea, it works especially well with Japanese green teas, but it's also less with Chinese green. So if you have just green tea and you don't know where it comes from, it probably comes from China. And so you can even try with the tea bags, just cold brew them. It's a fun thing to experiment with. But on that note, I will hand it over to Bill.
Well, all right. So yeah, I don't know that my last couple weeks has been all that interesting, but it's been, well, yeah, it has been interesting. So the migration for the show, the mintCast migration Odyssey continues. This week I've worked on getting the cloud infrastructure up and running. That is the new cloud infrastructure. I had something working the other night and people were able to sign into it, but I was having trouble with it because it's behind a reverse proxy and it wasn't trusting the reverse proxy, so it wasn't allowing people to create files on the Nextcloud or delete anything. And so I decided I was going to go ahead and tear that down and start over. Nextcloud has a config.php file in its config directory, which tells it it's a little different from like a WordPress installation in that Nextcloud will only open up for domains that it trusts. So it keeps people from doing like a man in the middle type attack where they can spoof the host name or something like that. So if you set up the host name, then you generate the SSL certificate for it, then this setting will it'll make sure that Nextcloud will only open for people that are connecting through that particular channel. And I was having trouble because the way it's working now is I've got a static IP address coming into my house. I did that so that I could run the Nextcloud server and the web server. I've got the web server set up on a Raspberry Pi. And it seems to work really well, but all of that was set up when I had a DHCP set up and I was using like a dynamic host name type thing. So I don't know if that's the reason I couldn't get it to work real well under the reverse proxy or not, but I just decided to build both of those things from the ground up again with the correct host names right from the beginning that we'll be using for the show. That way I'll know that it's actually built the way we need it. It's going to take some time. And this is all because several key elements of the show's infrastructure are ending on us at the same time, as I've mentioned before. Our website provider was giving us some free service. For whatever reason, that came to an end. And it seems as though they're really just a VPS that's been hosting the website. And if you SSH into that VPS, you'll see that it's running on Debian Stretch. And it's all the packages are way out of date, so that we needed to come up with a solution that would get us back on track and more up to date. Well, as we are right now, the website is still on that service. We did some work to get accounts switched over so that I could pay for it for a couple of months and keep it working while we switch things over to an on-prem, I guess, if you will, solution where I've got it just running here on my kit. and I can make sure that it stays up to date, and it's a zero cost option. That's really the crux of this whole thing. Is we here are a zero income show, meaning that we don't ask for any money from our audience, and as such we don't have any money to spend on infrastructure. So the best way to handle infrastructure when you're a zero income show is to come up with zero income or zero cost options, and that almost always involves doing things on your own. And so that's been every option I've come up with has been to that regard. So just long and short, I set up the static IP address. So if you was to do a ping on our website, now this is after I get it all done. If you do a ping on our website and then you do a ping on the Nextcloud server, it'll be the exact same IP address, because what's happening is that traffic comes into my house on that static IP. The reverse proxy, which by the way I'm using a really cool project called Nginx Proxy Manager, which is in a Docker container, and it basically runs an Nginx reverse proxy, but it gives you like a little GUI type thing on it, on a web-based thing to help you set up all these proxied connections. And it's an excellent project. I recommend it to anybody that has that particular need, because it also generates the SSL certificates for you, and it keeps everything organized. And once it's up and running, it's a set it and forget it kind of thing, which is kind of cool. But the thing about that is Nextcloud knows it's sitting behind that reverse proxy, so it requires a little extra configuration to keep it up and running. So that's exactly what I'm working on right now. In fact, I've been spending all weekend trying to get this set up and running. I've got until the 31st to have everything in place. That is when the Google thing will come to its fruition. And at that point, we will no longer be getting emails from our mintcast@mintcast.org email address from then on out. Anybody needing to or wanting to email the show will have to use the mintcast@gmail.com address. No big deal. It's just a free email address, and we will have the hosts will have our individual email addresses available in the show notes and on the website. We'll have to make sure that the website gets updated to reflect all that stuff as well. Anyway, that's all the crazy stuff I've been working on. We will keep everybody up to date as far as any information. As far as the YouTube channel goes, that's going to be like a straight transition where the channel doesn't really go away. It just gets transferred to another owner, if you will. It goes from being owned by the mintcast.org Google account to the mintcast@gmail.com. I've already set it up as an owner, but to set it up as a primary owner, you have to wait 7 days. So we're in that 7-day wait period right now. So as far as the YouTube channel goes, there won't be nobody will need to know or do anything for that to transition over. That'll just all remain the same. The MP3 feed will not change, because that's all just a feed coming from the website. So there's, as far as our viewers and our listeners are concerned, nobody will have to know to do anything, except if you want to write into the show, you just have to send it to the mintcast@gmail. So that's, that I was glad to be able to make the transition as painless for the viewers, for the listeners as possible, but yet make it happen in a way that makes sense and is effective. So, but that's all I've got on that right now.
And we are very grateful because you did most of the heavy lifting throughout the transition.
Yeah, I've
Like
got a ways
all
to
the
go
heavy
yet.
lifting.
Yeah,
I've got a ways to go yet to get it all up and running. But when I do, it's going to be slick, and maybe I can take a day off. But yeah, like I said, once it's up and running, listeners, viewers, the only thing you'll have to know is to start emailing. You could actually start doing that right now if you want. We've got I check it from time to time. I've got it set up on my phone. You can email the show at mintcast@gmail.com. Apparently we've had it for a long time because I see emails on there from 2013. So we've had it for a long time. We just haven't used it because, it's the @mintcast thing is more professional, sure, but like I said, when you got zero money coming with things that are zero money going out, otherwise you got to start asking money from people, and I don't. Maybe in the future, but I'm not real comfortable with. If we can come up with a way of doing this without causing any friction in the community, then that's what I would rather
always
do.
Set up a donation site or something.
Well, Moss has set up a sponsors thing,
Okay, yeah.
and
For mintCast or for himself?
yeah, for mintCast.
Okay.
He's philosophically opposed to Patreon. I don't know. I was kind of thinking Patreon is the thing that more people probably know of.
Yeah.
He's got a personal reason for that, but that's something that we can talk about later on, I suppose.
Yeah.
But that's something everybody has to be comfortable with, because there are some people that are just not crazy about a show that asks for money, and historically we don't. So, that I would be interested to hear from the community what everybody
Well, I know
thinks.
we had at least one listener that offered to help us out for a year. I can't remember which one. It was on the Telegram, and I just saw it in passing. But thank you. I will look to see if I can find the specific person that offered that. But we still want to try and get our costs as down to zero as possible.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, internet service isn't free, but it really just costed me an extra $13 a month to get a business account with a static IP, and you get a bunch of other benefits along with that too. Like you call up now that I got a business account, if you call up customer service, a human being answers the phone. Let that sink in for a second. You call up and a human being answers. I see the confusion.
I found a Telegram message that was offering to support for 12 months. It was Oliver Kelly.
Oh. Well, thank you, Oliver. I'd like to, if anything like that was to happen, I would like to set up a system or a Patreon or a sponsors or something.
Or a Ko-fi.
Or a Ko-fi. That's one I haven't looked at. I think I'd want it to be sponsors. That's the open source thing, right? That's got a more of an open back end.
Sponsors, but
I don't know much about any of them. The only one, Patreon, that I've
Ko-fi
supported
is
others.
just one-time donations, right?
I think you can set up to receive weekly or monthly or whatever anybody wants to give you. But no, I set up my Ko-fi. It hasn't been used or anything. I haven't gotten any money from it or anything. But I set one up at because Leo had previously had one set up, so I took that as a recommendation to give it a try.
I think having the option for monthly and one-time donations is good because people have more options in case we decide to do this.
Well, I think if we're gonna get serious about it, then we need to have every option that's out there, because you'll have people that'll only do one thing and not the other. So I mean that sponsors PayPal, Patreon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
mean,
who
it
wants to set up,
sponsors-
70 different accounts and then set up one more because their podcast that they listen
Right.
to only
Exactly.
uses such and such.
Yeah.
That was my argument with Moss, but Moss has got he
We have to talk about Patreon
yeah, we'll have to talk about that.
because it's probably the most
Well,
accessible one.
And it's
Let's-
it's absolutely the most.
See what we can get our costs down to, and then that will let us know what we need for a year or a month or whatever, and then see if the community wants to help.
I mean, because if we was to put, because I got to thinking, okay, what would it cost to put the website on DigitalOcean? And
It's $5
it's like
a month.
$5 a month, so we're not talking about gathering. I mean, if just a few people donated like $1 a month,
Right. 'Cause
then it would.
You're not looking at much traffic that would go through there, which would be your main limitation with like DigitalOcean.
Well,
Because
by the
they-
way, the bite mark thing was only
Yeah.
set up with very low resources.
yeah.
That's only got 1 gig of RAM, and
Well, you don't.
The
you
good
don't
thing
need
is
it
that-
for our webpage because the downloads happen through archive.org.
Yeah, that's the
so-
good thing. So the audio files are not hosted on the mintCast website, so it doesn't have to have a huge amount of data bandwidth.
absolutely correct. But we're gonna keep the community up to date as we go. Most of this is going to be in place by the end of this month, and that is because it has to be.
Yeah, we
because
will
the-
figure out some solution, and the show will continue on.
Oh yes.
And just like it's gone through a lot of iterative changes over the last almost 15 years now. So, yeah.
15. I thought it started in 2011, or is it much older than that? 2008.
Well, I thought it was 10 years old when I joined the show. And
Oh,
that's
then-
been 3 years, so like 13 years or something.
So it's
almost 4 years
2008
now.
or 2000. So around 2008, probably.
Something like that. I
So
might
that's
be
just-
wrong.
That's just 2 years after Linux Mint start released first. That's impressive.
Yeah.
So should we move to the innards?
Yeah. Why not? Let's do it.
Okay. So for the Linux innards, we have an interesting idea. We try and explore our ideas about if we were to develop our own distros, if each of us were to do their own distro, what would those distros be like? What components would they be built of? What defaults would they have? And I personally like the idea of a distro having two versions, one with a more high spec desktop environment and one with a more resource heavy desktop environment and one with a lighter desktop environment. For example, what Zorin and Mint do, because Zorin has their flagship version has GNOME, and they also have the light XFC version. And because I really like XFC, I wanted to start with this idea. And I was thinking in more realistic terms, something that's more doable, and more ambitious terms. So the more realistic one is just what most people do. They take a distro base, and build up on that. And there are a bunch of Debian and Arch-based distros, but what there isn't a lot of is Fedora-based distros. And because I'm running Fedora, if I ever were to develop my own distro, it would probably be based on Fedora. And what I would like to do is have a Fedora-based distro that has a lot of stuff set up by default that would make it more accessible to average users. Because Fedora is very close to being new user friendly, but there's just some additional setup you have to do, like adding additional repositories. So that's something I think an unofficial Fedora based distro wouldn't have to face the legal issues that, because Fedora itself doesn't include specific libraries and codecs in their repos, and that need those. So for example, media players, because Red Hat is based in the US, and I think there's some there would be some legal issue with them including those. So, but you can just add that as a user, and I think if someone would make a Fedora-based distro, there's I don't know the name, I don't remember the name, but there's a gaming oriented Fedora-based distro. Does anyone know the name of that? No, Nobara. I think it's Nobara. So I will have to look into that. But if they include, I mean, since it's a gaming basis, so they obviously have to include some non-free software by default. So yeah, basically, I would start with a Fedora base and have the non-free repositories by default. And I was thinking, so one of the desktops I would want to provide would be XFCE. And the other one I was thinking maybe Budgie, the GTK-based Budgie, because we don't really know what the Budgie 11 will look like. But I think Fedora doesn't have Budgie in their repos. So I could just go the GNOME route and use or maybe develop some extensions. Like, for example, I really like the Zorin menu extensions that they have specifically for their desktop. So basically, I would want to make Fedora more accessible. I would want to build on Fedora and make it more accessible, and it's sort of in the spirit of Zorin OS. And I'm not sure if I would keep the Anaconda installer, but I'm also not very. I also don't like a lot of distros use Calamares as their installer. So, but I've recently heard about a new installer that I think is developed by the GNOME team. It's just a generic OS installer that could be used by any distro, and it's built on the GNOME user guide interface guidelines. So it's a GTK-based installer. And if I'm going to provide GTK-based desktops, then maybe it would make sense to provide a GTK-based installer. And I do agree that the default Fedora installer Anaconda is not as easy to understand for new users. For example, you have to click buttons at the top, but if there's an error message, it appears at the very bottom. So when you set up your account and password and you click done, there's an error message at the bottom maybe saying that your password is too weak, and you might miss it because it's just not in the middle of the screen. So basically it would be, my idea of this distro would be to Fedora what Gecko Linux is to OpenSUSE. Just taking a base distro, doing some default, adding some default settings to it and making it easier to install. And one thing I really like about Zorin specifically is that how they took the GNOME Software Center. I think they forked it, and even if you are using a version of Zorin that doesn't use GNOME, it still has that software center. And I think what XFCE lacks and it would benefit from is a software center. So technically, I think you could use the GNOME software center even if you are not running GNOME on Fedora. So I haven't tried on XFCE, but if it's possible, I would like to keep the GNOME software even on the non-GNOME version of the distro. As far as the details go, like would I use what bootloader would I use, what file system would be the default, I think I would use systemd boot, because it's a personal thing. I don't really like grub, and refind is not a very simple thing to set up, and I read it in many places that systemd boot is not about it being easy to set up, but it's more straightforward, the under the hood stuff, the way it boots the system. I don't have a lot of experience with systemd boot, but I have tried it with Pop! OS and I really like the simplicity of it. And default applications, I'm not sure if I would include a lot of default applications. I like the approach of having a list in the installer too, where you can pick and choose popular applications like VLC or Chrome and stuff like that. So I really like Fedora as it is. I really like the package manager. So if I were to, I'm not a developer, but if I ever wanted to build a distro on top of Fedora, the biggest question is the installer, because I know what it would look like. Basically, just any other Linux installer, but with a list of applications that you can choose from. And if and that new GTK-based installer that one of the GNOME developers posted that I've seen, it's very early stage, but it looks interesting. So I might want to use something like that. So this was one approach. If I was thinking something more grandiose, that is not as easy to achieve. And so if I were to build a distro from scratch and not base it on something else, I had the idea of building on top of Void Linux and making it more user friendly, but because Void is similar to Arch in a sense that there are not a lot. Packages don't have as many things configured by default as, for example, Debian. So if I were to build a distro from scratch, I would try to make it a rolling release because I like what Void does. It's a rolling release that tries to be very stable. So, but yeah, I really like Fedora, so it would more likely I would try to build on top of Fedora. And I was thinking about a name, and I really like the sound of the word paguro, which means hermit crab in Italian. So I was really happy with this idea, but then I discovered that the Fedora team and Red Hat had I think it's a bug tracking page called Pagure, and their logo is a snail shell. So I think it most definitely comes from the word paguro or some sort of form of hermit crab. So it turns out it's not a very original idea, and it would be confusing to have a Fedora-based distro called Paguro when Fedora has a website called Pagure. But I like since this is just a theoretical thing, I would like to stick with that name for the distro. And how about you, Joe?
Well, basically, Mint is what I would make. I definitely want either a Debian or an Ubuntu backend, but I do like having a choice in desktop, so I'd want either Cinnamon, I'd want Cinnamon and Mate to be available. I'm also really good with Grub. I've never had any non-recoverable problems with Grub. Most of the problems that I do end up having with Grub in the past have been graphics driver related, and that's just getting the right mode sets and everything else so that it will probably boot, so then I can figure out what the actual problems are. I'm still a fan of System D and X11. They're both fine by me. I know X11 has its security issues and a whole lot of tech debt issues due to the age and all the patching that has gone into it, but I like all the options that come with it that really aren't available for like Wayland yet, like a lot of the screen sharing stuff. I know that's in the works, but it's not quite there yet for me. I do sometimes like to try out different shells because they're cool, but I always end up back on Bash or, Corn Shell. I do like Fish, but probably would end up just using Bash simply because I'm basic. Because I like my distros to work out of the box, I would definitely have proprietary codecs installed so that, any video that I wanted to watch would just work. And then the other applications that I would want to be included would definitely be VLC, X2Go, server and client both. I'd want Chrome to be installed on there, and definitely something that like Mint is missing after you install it that I would want there is gparted. And then for like me personally, I would want Audacity to be there, and also preferably some type of like virtual machine, like VirtualBox to already be there. Maybe also a heavyweight version that would include things like Steam and then WhatsApp, Discord, Telegram, anything else that you can really think of. But that would be
installed by default.
Yeah, well, not necessarily installed by default either, but available to be installed, like in much the way a couple of other applications have done it. Like Garuda has their click to install all these different applications, but Pinguy had most of those installed already, and I was a fan of Pinguy, and it's not really around anymore. But I
So it's
thought it
something
worked
that
pretty well.
something like what Linux Lite has. They don't have a software center that has all the packages, but they have a software installer that has a list of popular packages,
And then
basically.
you just click through and check what
Yeah.
you want and click.
Yeah, it's like maybe 100 packages, but
Mm.
it's a lot of software like Google Chrome.
Yeah, that would definitely make things easier. But mostly I run Cinnamon, and then sometimes I'll run Mate, and then I'll try out other ones, but I always end up back on those two. So I don't need much else than that. And
It's
then-
interesting how we took two different approaches. Me describing how I would build a distro that I would want other people to use, and you described distro that you would like to use the most.
Yeah, if I'm going to build a distro, I'm going to build it for me, and then if other people like it, then by all means they can use it. But in the end, I'm going to build it for me.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. A lot of distros were born that way.
Yeah. Well, how about you, Bill?
Well, all right. So if I were to build one and time wasn't an element, I think what I would do is I would come up with two very distinct versions of Bill OS. One would be based on Debian. One would be based on Arch. The Debian version would be based on SID, and the Arch would be purpose-built for gaming. And I would have separate ISOs for both of these for the time being, at least, for Nvidia and Mesa, much the same as you get with Pop OS right now. I would have I would have to say the desktop would be a choice between Mate and GNOME, which I know is strange coming from a Plasma user, but I think for people that are wanting to install something and keep it working, the Plasma update and development cadence is a bit much to keep up with all the time. So I think, either your Mate, if you're for somebody that's just wanting to spin something up, play games on it, I think a choice like Mate or GNOME would probably be best.
Speaking of GNOME, I forgot to mention that I would most definitely include the app indicators extension.
Yes, the app indicators extension, and because I'm a distro maintainer now, I'm going to be putting much pressure on the GNOME project to incorporate that in. Because come on, people, get over yourselves.
I think what the best way to add app indicators to GNOME would be to have them in the overview, because they don't want to put them on the panel because they don't want the panel to be crowded, which I can understand. But there's the drop-down menu from the panel that you can have the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth quick settings. Maybe it could be included there, or it could just be in one of the corners of the overview. Just an idea.
Something, because there's just the other M just said good luck with that. Yeah, I don't know. Just to completely avoid the topic altogether is just I don't know. Well, anyway, I'd call the Debian version full on and the Arch version full Monty. Now, I was in a mood when I wrote this.
I thought it would be full on and right on, because you like to say right on.
No, I didn't think of that. That would be so cool. Yeah. Maybe I'll use that for my server version. I'll get to that in a minute. They will both come with most of the basic tools you would expect to see from Mint, or something like that. And I would provide install links for things like LibreOffice, and I would also offer like a more lightweight alternative, because I doubt everybody needs a full-on complete chunky office suite, that does everything. So many distributions include that entire suite. And I don't know if it's because there's not a real easy way of installing just the writer by itself or what, but
Well, to be fair, there's not many things in, because I just installed the entirety of LibreOffice, and there's Writer and there's Calc, which I use a lot, and I guess having Impress for presentations is nice to have, but then there's Math, Draw, and Base. I guess I only use 3 out of 6, so
I think the only thing that's missing that's not in parity with MS Office is the email client.
yeah.
Which I've often
That's
thought that would be
interesting.
cool.
They could have an email client.
They could. I can't be the first person to think of that, but that might be a huge undertaking.
But I guess it's just simple and easy to include everything in a distro.
Yeah, probably.
Or if you're Slack where you have everything anyway.
You do have a tougher time, even on Arch. It's a little tougher to just install LibreOffice Writer by itself, and that's because the whole suite integrates with itself so much. So I mean,
yeah, I like just having one keyboard shortcut for opening just LibreOffice itself, where I can see recently edited files of all types,
and that must be
it's
why.
Convenient, yeah.
Lost my place again. Yeah, I would also offer more lightweight. So for somebody that just needs to open a word processor and maybe write a letter then every now and then, something like Abby Word is perfectly fine for that. If you have absolutely no need for an Office suite whatsoever. Now, in the past, I would have included, like Joe said, I would put VLC into it. That was because in the days of yore, you might struggle to play something that had a certain esoteric codec or something in it. Nowadays, the story is a little bit better, and it's trivial to get something to play on something a little lighter weight like celluloid or something like that. But I would leave that up to the user, and I would probably just install it with the lightweight stuff. But to get onto the server ISO, because this is really the thing I wanted to touch on the most, I would have something similar to the Debian installer that wasn't completely graphic, but it was graphic enough to give a person options to help them walk through. I would offer full ButterFS support in the installer, just the same as you don't even know it's happening with projects like Endeavor OS. They've got full ButterFS. What I mean by full ButterFS support is if you choose ButterFS as your root file system, it automatically creates the /var/home and a couple other subvolumes without you having to do that manually. And that's the stuff you need in order to be able to do your snapshotting and all that. So that would be something I would offer in the ISO. And then I would also offer options to build right out of the box a complete lamp stack.
To build.
Well, yeah, because just installing the lamp stack is half the battle, right?
Yes, but you have to spell it Bill''D.
He can't be stopped, folks. Yeah, build D. Yeah, I would offer the build D service that could be, you could activate it by system control, start build D, and then I will be there on your machine running in the background for the rest of your life. But yes, I would offer an option to get LAMP up and running and walk you through the process of setting up the database and things like that. I don't know how I would do any of this. This is just me imagining. And then I would also include something like Cockpit. Cockpit's a Red Hat project that basically it listens on a certain port and then runs a little web interface, and then you've got it gives you a complete control panel of a server
On
right there
as a web page in a browser, right?
yeah.
I've heard that Fedora wants to transition their installer to be cockpit based.
Yeah, and it would be something along that lines. Or it would be just, maybe they mean, when they say web-based, they mean Electron or something. I don't know. Because, I mean, you still have to be able to do that locally.
I've read a very interesting description of Electron. Someone called it enslaved Chromium.
I mean, what else is it besides just a Chromium web browser with all of the other stuff stripped, the title bar stripped off of it, and then just running your application like a web page? That's basically it. I don't see why that has to be a bad thing. I suppose as long as it doesn't have to connect to a whole lot of Google APIs in order to work.
I guess it's only a bad thing because people tend to complain about Chromium in general using a lot of RAM.
Sure. But computers nowadays, I mean, how much of that is an issue compared to what it might have been at one time? If you can come up with a better way to do it, sure. So yeah, I'd have Cockpit on there. I use Cockpit on my servers here at home, and I like it. It's good for somebody like me. I need to be able to, and once this is all, the infrastructure for our show is up and running, I need to be able to administer this from the road. Like if I'm in the mountains in West Virginia somewhere and somebody pings me on Discord and says that they're having trouble with the server, I need to be able to have access to these servers from there via WireGuard, which works amazingly well, by the way. I actually built a web server last week from the road via WireGuard, and that worked remarkably well. So
this sounds so cool. Just managing a server on the road.
Yeah, and Cockpit is perfect for something like that, because I could actually, even if I really wanted to, I could forward that port and just access that from the internet, because it's got like a username and password thing.
You could use Cockpit by sitting in the cockpit.
I could. He's on fire, folks.
I mean that wasn't that as good as but it sounded better in my head.
When you're already rolling,
So that's why the rolling release.
Right. There you go, kids. Yeah, so the server option would be something I would be very interested in. Documentation. Okay, that's like one of the least interesting things people like to talk about when they're coming up with a new distro. But documentation, I think, is one of those things that people should probably pay more attention to than they do. And the Arch Wiki is great. Chances are it's there, whatever problem you're looking for, but in some cases you have to know what you're looking for. So I think there's room for a reimagination of that concept, and then alongside that a more tutorial-based documentation system that's a little bit more like some of the things Ubuntu has, where you've got this thing you want to do. Here's a step-by-step process that you can go through, and there's a lot of things you copy and paste. And then you're ready to move on to the next step. Instead of having everything on the screen in front of you and then going into great detail about every little step, I can see how somebody might get a little overwhelmed by that. And so, documentation would be a big thing that I would want to focus on. Again, this is if time and money is not even a thing. And again, let's imagine that money is no object, and I had all the resources in the world, and I was able to hire talented people. The one thing I would just love to be known for is fixing the accessibility story on Linux. this is a problem with no clear solution. And it's only because we don't have the commercial imperative that proprietary operating systems do. We need developers that are uniquely specialized in handling the unique challenges of disabled people, or people that have certain I don't like using the word disabilities, but the people that have needs that are above and beyond or beside that which what normal people are used to. And sometimes that takes a level of creativity that, your average developer might not have. It's a very niche skill set within the development community. And
You
it's
tend to in Linux you tend to see sometimes features being added because the developers themselves want to have those features.
yeah.
And I remember Moss saying that all of the vision impaired and blind people that he knows use macOS. So it's probably the OS that has the best accessibility features.
It's a chicken or egg problem, because we would need, obviously, or it seems obvious to me, the best developers to come up with solutions for accessibility problems would be developers, like you said, that are developing things to suit their own needs. The problem is they're probably on Mac because those things already exist there. They have the tools. If they're developers, they've already got the tools to make these machines work for them so that they can do development on those machines. So I don't know what direction we would need to go to fix that problem. It would need a joint effort, I think, among a lot of very talented, very creative people.
I think among the Linux desktops, GNOME might be the one that has the best accessibility features.
Well, they definitely have the best chance of getting the right kind of development.
So it would make the most sense to take what's already there and improve on that. So improve on the GNOME accessibility features.
And I would, that is a problem I have no idea how to begin to solve, but it would be a really enjoyable thing to attempt to solve, because you got to know people. I mean, if you started something meaningful and you were communicating in the community about the things you were doing, people would. I like to think that the thing that makes Linux unique is that we are more community oriented than any other way of computing in the world, because this is more of a you have to change your way of thinking to use Linux. It's more of a you have to shift your way of thinking from, I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to buy this thing and it's just going to do the things I need. You have to shift away from that to a thinking that's more along the lines of, okay, I've got this thing and I'm going to figure out what I can on my own, and then I'm going to look to the community to help me figure out the things I don't already know. And then once I figure these things out, I'm going to share that knowledge with other people that are trying to learn along the way, because we are community when it comes to computing, and that's something I really like to stress whenever I'm trying to explain how Linux works to somebody, because it's not the same kind of word as Windows. It encompasses a few other things that just buying a device and using it for the thing it was intended for. The whole idea of our community is a little more involved than that. But that's probably the number one thing I would want to work on. Even if I wasn't able to come up with something that was just, here, this is the distro that's got the best accessibility options, if it was nothing more than making a couple of contributions that would sort of push the process along the way, that would be important to me. And then if Bill OS becomes the distro of the year, then too. But anyways, that's all I got.
The end of this discussion turned into sort of a free flowing discussion. We should try at one point to have an intersection where we don't prepare anything and we just talk about whatever comes up.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me.
Okay. Then you probably won't see any of our described distros be available anytime soon. But I think it was a nice idea. And I guess if you, I guess, but I mean, well, I guess taking an existing distro, just building on top of it sounds easy. But I think about building on distro is that you have to maintain it and you have to provide support. So it's probably another that's probably a whole different beast than just putting together a distro. But yeah, well, let's go and transition to the vibrations from the ether. And I will hand it over to Joe.
Okay, and I do want to mention that Londoner did find that the first episode of mintCast was on 24 November 2008.
Oh, so my second guess was right.
And we did, well, I got one vibration from the ether. Someone emailed me. His name is Josue. Hi Joe, Josue here, longtime listener and Linux user since 2005. Have you ever felt fed up with Linux? For me, it all began with the purchase of a MacBook with the M1 chip. I have always used Linux both on my desktop PC and my laptop. I have been an advocate for open source software and follow Linux YouTube channels, podcasts, and blogs. I started with Linux Mint for a couple of years, Debian for like 5 years, and then I was distro hopping until I settled with Fedora for the last year and a half, to the point that all of my work-related tasks can be completed with Linux, MS Teams, Citrix Workspace, WebEx, even Citrix VPN. As a good Linux user, I was always looking to make changes, so less than a year ago, I was amazed by the news regarding the power of the M1 chips on the new Mac computers, and I wanted to change my desktop laptop peripherals to only one laptop with Thunderbolt, so I can dock to my desktop monitor. I made the good, bad decision of buying the MacBook Pro with M1 chip. I didn't know at the moment that I was not able to install Linux on it, which was a terrible mistake. At first I felt tempted of selling it, however I decided to stick around and play with it. A year later I can tell you that my Mac does all that I need and more, without any issues whatsoever. The only sad part is me hearing the podcast and wanting to use Linux again. I have an old i7 8th gen Dell Optiplex which I installed Linux again. There is some software that I miss so badly. Kdenlive, Ocular, 2 apps that I use regularly and have not been able to install on the Mac laptop. Can you believe that I find software that is on Linux but not in other platforms? I bought another Dell Latitude i5 10th Gen 16GB of RAM laptop at a good price on eBay, so I wanted to resell it and make some profit. But before selling it, I installed Linux Mint, and oh boy, was I spoiled by the Mac so much. The bottom of the Dell was very hot. Fans were not loud, but I was just not used anymore to hearing fan noises. Speaker performance were just meh. I really miss Linux so badly. However, I might have been spoiled by the aesthetics and performance of the Mac laptop. I want to find inspiration or maybe even a decent laptop that convinces me to just return to Linux. For now, I will use once in a while the Dell Optiplex just to have good memories, but my main driver will remain the MacBook laptop. Thanks for reading me, Josue M. PD, good luck with the LPIC 1. I did it as well as LPIC 2 back in 2016, and it was a heck of a ride. We were 21 at first, and only me and someone else completed both certs. I did respond. Yes, I do sometimes get fed up with Linux. I do also understand the appeal of having a system that just works, and the screens on all the Macs are simply epic. But I do also enjoy working with Linux and all the fun of free and open source with the extra work that goes into it. I know some guys are working on Linux for the M1, and I would love to hear how well that works. It's still early days for the project, so probably not daily driver. Also, if you still have some applications that only show up in Linux, then maybe try out a VM and let us know how that works for you. All of us on the podcast have mentioned many times that we use what works for us, and we will give people crap about using Macs or Windows or Arch. We still go with use what works for you philosophy. Now, if you're looking for a specific laptop that will look good, sound good, feel good, the only real thing that I can mention that might have that similar build quality would be the Dell XPS 13, the newer ones. Basically, any of the new ones. They will have an epic screen and an epic feel to them, and basically they're going to just run Linux. So
How about the System 76 laptops?
I can't say anything about the System 76 laptop specifically because I've never had one in my hands. But if that's your recommendation, then yeah, that could work for him too. And I was just looking for things that I knew had that really, really good screen the way the Mac does. And the M1, you know, it's going to be super silent, and it's going to be a really good processor, and eventually one day Linux will run on it. But you know, maybe not as smooth as Mac OS.
I think anybody that starts using Linux for any reason whatsoever, you can't do it because it's the best option.
Or the
I mean, and when I say best, I mean the easiest or the most performant. This is just my opinion, but the entire reason I've ever used Linux is because this is something I got to work on my own. You know, this is something I had to learn how to make work, and this is something I can be a part of its process. You know, I can have direct contact with the developers. I can get on a podcast and talk about it and things. You know, it's if those kind of things are important to you, then that's, you know, Linux is your thing. But if you and I'm not downing people for being this way, but if your only need machine is to fire it up and have it work 100% of the time to do this one thing that you need to do, then you're probably better off with a Mac or Windows machine.
Yeah, I mean, like the first time I used Linux in like 2000, 2001, somewhere in that time frame, I used it for a little while, but then I ended up switching back to Windows and stayed on Windows for most of a decade, and then switched back to Linux again. So it happens.
It does.
It might also be worth mentioning Asahi Linux, which is a distro that doesn't have a stable release yet, but there is a pre-release, and their goal is to build a distro that is fully compatible with the M1 chips. So the current release, you can install that side by side with macOS on any Mac. Well, at least I think you can do it on the Mac Minis and the MacBooks. But there's a lot of things that don't work yet. For example, graphical GPU acceleration. But it is a way to get Linux on the M1, and it will probably improve each year. So maybe in a couple of years it will be daily drivable.
Londoner just mentioned something that I was not aware of on the YouTube chat. If you run a VM on a M1 Mac, it will only run an ARM-based distro. They cannot run x86-based ones, at least for now. So
I think I read somewhere that they can, but it's a performance penalty.
Well, yeah.
So they may be able to. So they are good enough to emulate x86. I'm not sure. So We don't have anything in Check This Out this time, so let's head over to housekeeping and the announcements. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something that you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us an email at mintcast@gmail.org, right? We should be saying that email from now on.
Gmail.com.
Okay. So
Yeah.
mintcast@gmail.com.
Yeah.
You can join us live on YouTube, and all the live stream information is at mintcast.org/livestream. You can post at the Mintcast subreddit, chat with us on Telegram, Discord, Facebook, or you can post directly at mintcast.org. Our next episode will be live at 2 p.m. US Central on the 29th on May 29th, and our next live stream will be at 2 p.m. US Central Time on May 21st. And you can get these dates, and you can get these times converted to your time zone via the links in the show notes. And like we said, we will be soon migrating our YouTube channel to our new. Well, I guess this is not relevant. So
that'll be a transparent.
Yeah. Okay.
thing.
Okay. So
the YouTube channel, like I said, the YouTube channel will stay the same.
And now the wrap up. When can we find you, Joe?
Well, you can listen to me on a couple other shows. I'm on the Linux Link Tech Show, which you can find at tllts.org. I'm on the Linux Lugcast, which you can find at linuxlugcast.com. You can send me an email directly, jb@mintcast.org, although I assume that has to change here shortly. And I will let you know what that's going to be next show, because I don't want emails getting lost, because I get so many emails on my main email.
I'm gonna keep that going.
I think everyone could just send emails to the mintcast@gmail.com if they want to message one of the hosts, because so everyone can see everything that way.
You can set up the same kind of forwarding that you were using with mintcast.org email.
Like me, I have had people that emailed me and specifically said, "Hey, don't share this."
Okay.
They just wanted a conversation between me and them. So
Okay.
at the very least, I will have an email up there.
Okay,
And
so we will have, for the next episode, we should probably update our contacts, so everyone should provide a private email address for the wrap up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I do have a Ko-fi link in there. And then Moss, who was not able to make the show today, if you want to catch him, you can catch him at Full Circle Weekly News, Distro Hoppers Digest, Bard Moss at pm.me.
He's clever. He already has a private email listed.
I don't think his. I think his mintcast email went away a while ago, and we just never brought it back. And then there's contact info on It's Moss, and you can catch him at Zavala at hostux.social.
I assume that's a Mastodon profile, because it starts with an @ symbol.
Okay, and Bill?
Okay. Well, you can email me at good old wchauser@gmail.com. I'm Bill_H on Discord, at WCHauser3 on Twitter, and I'm WCHauser3 on Facebook. Also, check out my, I say new podcast, but it's not really all that new. Check out 3 Fat Truckers. Check us out on 3ftpodcast.org. And a quick plug for Moss's Full Circle Weekly News. That's got to be one of my favorite news podcasts. It's quick. He gets a heck of a lot of information out there, a lot of headlines. So if you're just wanting the quick and dirty and move on with your day, I really recommend his show. So how about you, Norbert?
Well, I would say that you can send me an email at norbert@mintcast.org, but since these emails are going away, I should set up I will have to figure this out, but I do read the Mintcast Telegram group regularly, so in the meantime, if you want to get in touch with any of us, by the way, I really like the Mintcast Telegram community, so you should check that out. And Nishant couldn't join us today, but you can send him an email at nishant@mintcast.org for the time being. You can find him as ReconGhost on Instagram, ReconGhost at GitHub, Ghost.recon on Discord, and Maverick00783 at Steam. Before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Josh Lowe for all of his work on the website, Hopstar for our logo, Initardi for the animated Discord logo, and Londoner for our time sync. Tony Hughes for our audio editing of the show, Archive.org for hosting our audio files, and finally, the Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about. Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem. Good show, guys.
Stop my recording.
Good show indeed.
Export audio.
Oh, yeah. Somebody has to tell me what to do.
387, and then my name.
Did you add the hyphen in between?
No, I didn't.
He won't know what to do if you don't.
Yeah. We're still far away from having a standardized naming scheme for the audio files, but we're getting there.
When we move to the next cloud, we're going to have to, from time to time, prune the flags.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that sucker's going to fill up.
Mm-hmm.
I've got, it's 2 terabytes on ZFS, and I've got compression enabled, but I've got no way to know. I got no way to.
Is compression very efficient with audio files?
I don't know. We'll have to see.
I know that it doesn't work well with pictures and videos because those are already in a way compressed.
Yeah.
But
It's hard to tell, but with a FLAC.
yeah,
I don't know.
FLAC is already a lossless compressed file, so maybe it doesn't really add a lot to it. Has there ever been a case of previous of going back and using previous FLAC audios of individual tracks after an episode is uploaded? Because
Not that I'm aware.
maybe we don't really have to keep them as long.
We don't have to, really. It's just sheer laziness that we keep them on there as long as we do.
I think we could keep them
we
for
have
a
the
few
space.
months, and then once that show's been up and we're not even thinking about it anymore. No real
Yeah.
reason to.
So maybe we should just keep a FLAC of the edited show along the MP3.
Yeah.
Although there
just,
might
yeah.
have been a few episodes that I only exported as MP3. I wanted to talk about the MP3 feed, which only has room for 10 episodes. We could try to look for a different service to do that. It would probably be paid
Is
for.
that just a setting on Blueberry?
I think Leo mentioned that because it's a free implementation of something,
A
and
Blueberry, yeah.
and the free version only has room for 10 episodes, which is a shame because if someone wants to listen to the back catalog, they can't do that in their podcast catcher. They have to go to the website and download manually.
The problem is that Blueberry plugin is what makes the episodes look really nice on the web page itself.
Mm-hmm.
And
Does it have a good VUp? Because if we switch to something else, I guess that means that